You introduce it as usual and invite me to speak.
She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frack, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. Forgot a crow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cock crow, dagaba, donkey bray, horse and they even duck a quack.
All right. Hey, good evening and welcome to Anansi Web Education, another edition. We're talking about matters in the villages all across Guyana. And we will continue with this week's topic of Venezuela. With us, we are waiting our operator, Lemon, to ensure that we have the former president, David Arthur Granger, will join us in just about 30 seconds or so. So thank you guys for sharing the link as we prepare to deal with this topic here today. And yes, the Honorable David Granger is on with us. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm glad to be back on this program and glad to be able to discuss with the Guyanese population in general what is the state of relations with Venezuela. And I think this series of programs is very important to help us to understand, and particularly I'm concerned about the villages on the, what I call the western borderlands, running away all the way from Imbatero to Arau, along the rivers. And I think people don't realize some of those people are living in fear, particularly in the Burima Waini and to some extent in the Kuyuni Mazruni River region. And this series of programs is about Venezuela, but it's about the security of our villages as well. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And we're happy to have you here again this evening, right here on 107.1 FM. Good evening to all of you all across Guyana, wherever you are. And thank you so much for sharing the link. Hope you're having a wonderful day thus far. Let's begin right away, Mr. Granger. And just to give a little background, Guyanese migrants and their descendants live mainly in Puerto Ortaz and San Felix, cities of at the confluence of the Orinoco and the Caruni rivers, as you've just stated. Their descendants, although bearing recognizable Guyanese family names, speak a form of Spanish language and have adopted Venezuelan culture and political opinions. Some have come to Guyana, the homeland of their parents and grandparents. They may best be described as Venezuelan Guyanese. Venezuelan Guyanese. First question for today. What factors influence the migration of Venezuelan Guyanese to Guyana?
Well, it's a good place to start because many of the migrants coming from Venezuela have no connection with Guyana. So it's a different set of migrants. And as far as the Venezuelan Guyanese are concerned, I think it is a historical fact that the majority of Guyanese are descendants of migrants anyway. Every Chinese, Portuguese, and East Indian in Guyana is descendant of migrants who came to Guyana voluntarily. The only people who didn't come voluntarily were the Africans. And of course, the Amerindian people were living here from time immemorial. Why did they come? Well, why do people migrate? As I said, migration happens all over the world. People come for a better life. And what happened is that um, in the 60s, as a result of the violence that was perpetrated by the PPP, called the disturbances, in which the PPP launched something called the Hurricane of Protest, many Guyanese started to flee. Many Portuguese went to Toronto or Florida. Um, Many other people went to Brooklyn or Queens because the violence was intense in the 1960s. And as a result of that, the migration of Guyanese started. And what happened is that it just continued. Once a father or a mother goes away, you'd send for the children or send for relatives. And at present, we don't even know how many Guyanese or descendants of Guyanese are living in Venezuela. We know that most of them are concentrated in eastern Venezuela at Puerto Ordaz and San Felix, which are two like port cities on the Orinoco and Caroni rivers. But some estimates put the Venezuelan Guyanese at as high as 80,000. And no estimate has been lower than about 25,000. So in any event, no matter how you look at it, a substantial number of Guyanese descendants live in those two communities, Puerto Ordaz and San Felix. And they went away because the conditions were bad. Many of them are not apparently highly educated or rich people. Some of them, even after they've arrived in Venezuela, are living in barrios. Some of them don't have documents. And some of them have been deported because they don't have documents. The barrios are like slums. And some of them get involved in drug trafficking and petty crime. So they're not well off, generally speaking. And if they fled a better life, the reason why they're returning is because that better life turned out to be a nightmare. And they now feel that they made a bad decision in the first place. And the sort of the dream has ended, and they feel that the prospects of living in Guyana are much better. So to answer your question, they were influenced because they felt that the life in Venezuela is better. And in fact, the places like Puerto Ordaz and San Felix are pretty well developed cities. They're industrial cities. They produce steel, aluminum, and other manufactured goods. And what has happened now because of mismanagement of the Venezuelan economy, a lot of household goods are in short supply. I've heard of Guyanese families sending food hampers to their relatives in eastern Venezuela. So you can see the tide has turned. So they are coming back. Some of them are coming back. And if they feel that the prospects of living in Guyana are brighter, they will do what humans have been doing throughout history all around the world. They'll go where life is better. And that's why I think we should expect more of them to come. They left in droves in the 1960s, and now they're coming back in droves. That is what is taking place.
And in coming back, before we go to the second topic there, coming back in droves, some of them left with documents, some of them do not have documents. Do you think we have proper system in place to vet individuals, especially if they say they have no documents, but they were born in Guyana?
No, we have no system. The Venezuelans have a better system. In fact, they have an institution for migrants and immigration and citizenship. In Guyana, in 2015, the APNU AFC created such an institution. It's called the Department of Citizenship. and a minister was in charge of the department. And although the migration or remigration started in 2014, we were able to get on top of it by ensuring that we collaborated with the International Organization for Migration, United Nations Commission for Children and for Human Rights, and so on. And we started documenting the migrants because we didn't know who they were. They had no documents. At least we brought some regularity to the process. But as soon as the PPP got into office, they shut down the department until they realized that it was a huge task. So there's no system now, but there is more than a suspicion that because there's no system, a lot of people who are not entitled might now be designated as Venezuelan Guyanese, and some of them are clueless, some of them are penniless, some of them are homeless, and we're sitting on a time bomb. We really don't know. We really don't know. And there's no single department. We know that one person from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs went there, spoke to them, but he was more interested in promising them, duty-free cars and all sorts of concessions. But he did not set up a system for registration and migration. So we might end up with a bloated list of so-called Venezuelan Guyanese, but we don't know who they are. We don't even know if they're Colombians, if they came from Ecuador. I think the public does not know enough, and the government of the day, the PPP administration, is not putting institutions in place in which we have confidence. We don't have confidence in what is taking place now. We don't know who we're letting into the country and who we're making citizens, quite frankly. I don't know.
Certainly, nobody seems to know, but lots of folks are just being transformed into automatic citizenship. They're getting registration at GCOM, all manner of suspicious activities by this regime. Next question. How capable, Mr. Granger, is Guyana of managing the migration of Venezuelan Guyanese? Something you briefly touched on there, but can you elaborate a little more? How capable is Guyana in managing the migration of Venezuelan Guyanese?
It's a question, first of all, of political will. I do not see the political will. APNU had the will to bring order out of chaos in 2015. We knew that migration was a problem. We inherited a very bad situation in 2015, and we set up a minister and we set up a department. Right now, what is happening, it seems to be under the table. We know that senior people have visited and spoken to some of these Venezuelan Guyanese. We see photographs of them in air-conditioned rooms in Anna Regina, and we hear promises of duty-free allowances and vehicles and all sorts of concessions. But we don't think this is management of the problem. It seems to be, as if they're dealing with a favored group of selected persons. When you look at the size of the Venezuelan migration, you're talking about 40,000 people in Guyana alone. But the people who are described as Venezuelan Guyanese are, well, much smaller, because when you see the pictures of the Venezuelan migrants, you see people with bows and arrows, you see barefoot people, you see mothers with children. But these so-called Venezuelan Guyanese are sitting down in air-conditioned rooms in Anna Regina. So it seems to be two systems. There seem to be two systems in operation. And we don't know what is happening, but certainly this is a system based on favorites. It's based on a selected group, and it's not open system. If it's an open system, I say let's get the Haitians back, let's get the Bangladeshis back, let's get the Cubans back, and give everybody a chance to become citizens. But this is very specific. How capable are we? I don't know if Guyana has the will to have a fair system. What is taking place now cannot be described as a fair and open and transparent system. It seems to be a closed system, an exclusive system for certain classes of migrants. It could easily build that capability. And 8 years ago, the APNU had established that. There's a building there, it's called the Stephen Campbell Building. There was a minister and there was staff. And I think we had got the grip of the migrant situation. Right now, I think we've lost that hold on the migrant situation. I don't know if we have the will. We have the capacity. We have the capacity and we have the capability, but people are not being put in place. And again, I need to come back to a grave transgression of the PPP administration. We had set up something called the Bertram College of the Public Service to train public servants. And as soon as the PPP got in, they shut down the college. So you don't even have the public servants who could go out in the field and get a grip of the situation with the migrants. Everything seems to be highly politicized. The regional systems are highly politicized. And we see people squatting on sea dams, we see squatting on the seashores. And it seems that all of this is taking place in a political sphere. It is not part of the administrative and governmental sphere. All these things are taking place at like a political party process, not a governmental process, which you have immigration officers, you have police officers, you have registration officers. Something else is taking place, a very shadowy process. We have the capability, but I don't know if we have the will, quite frankly.
We have the capability, but the big question is whether there is the will. And a lot of people are asking that very question, whether we have the will. The next question, it says here, where are the Venezuelan Guyanese most likely to settle? We've been hearing all manner of things. Some of them are on the Lynn and Suzdike Highway. Some of them are in Essequibo. Some of them are spotted in Bat settlement. Some of them pass a little village called Philippi till up the quarantine. All over we're hearing. But the question, and we'd like to hear it from you, Mr. Granger, where are the Venezuelan Guyanese most likely to settle?
This is a big issue because we don't know where they came from in the first place. So they don't have relatives, they don't have hometowns, they don't have roots. Even if they're the descendants of Guyanese who went there 60 years ago, their parents might have died, and they may have Guyanese names, a Posada or something. But I mean, there's so many of them in the country. They can't go back to a village and say, "Hey, I've come back home. I'm your prodigal son." So where are they likely to settle? And this is what is happening now. They're settling on the seashore. They're settling on dams along the river banks. They're scattered. So it is becoming daily more difficult to find out where they are, who they are, and to control this process. Because some people are just hustling for existence, hustling for a job as translators, interpreters for Cuban suitcase traders. They're working in bars. Some of them are doing strange work at night. Nobody knows what is happening. One newspaper ran a story a few weeks ago stating that some of the women, are doing strange work. I don't know if this is going to lead to social problems. As far as the ones who were staying in the Berima Waini region concerned, there has been a lot of uneasiness among the Guyanese, the resident Guyanese there, because they're being outnumbered. It's called migrant overflow. There are more migrants now in the Berima Waini than there are Guyanese local born. So they're going into people's land, they're stealing crops, they're going into garbage bins. The situation is not under control. And when you decide on where they settle, you need to make some hard decisions. I mean, a lot of Guyanese are being thrown out of areas that they had occupied on Supply on the East Coast and Mocha Arcadia. We know that the police have been turned out using tear gas and using very strong arm methods against Guyanese who have legitimate claims to the land. But we will end up in a situation in which these 40,000 migrants are just being given land that Guyanese can't get. So where are they to settle? My recommendation was, and it was made while I was in office, to designate a zone, a sort of reception and resettlement zone. In the first instance, I'm not trying to create a concentration camp. I'm not recommending creating a concentration camp or a ghetto, but there must be a place where they go. But they must learn to produce their own food. They must get properly vaccinated. They must go to school and learn English language. They must be inducted into Guyanese citizenship. But you know what is happening now is quite chaotic. You know, and it will be difficult to tidy up the situation because it's just running wild. We don't know where they are at present, and I would say that if we created that zone, let us say the zone is in Burima Waini. Okay, there may not be enough jobs for everybody, but at least we can look at a place where they can have houses, where they can produce food, and where they could be protected, and where the local residents are not living in fear that these migrants will come and raid their farms, or the girls will be going down, you know, by the waterfront and doing strange things at night. The situation now is untenable, and we want to ensure that that whoever comes in, whether they are Venezuelans or Haitians or anybody else, they'll be going to designated places where they could be taught the conditions of Guyanese life, and they could be, you know, encouraged to become good citizens. Right now, we don't know the outcome of this chaos, quite frankly, and we don't know where they're going to be settling. We know that for the start, they were along the western borderlands, particularly in Burima Waini and Kuyuni Mazruni, but no, it's like a cancer metastasizing all over the place, you know, and it's difficult to understand what the government's non-strategy is. It's not a strategy, it's a non-strategy.
Non-strategy indeed, difficult to understand. They're not, people are not seeing any strategy at all. And lots of strange things are happening in Guyana. Lots of strange things as it pertains to the influx of Venezuelans into Guyana. It seems to be an open playing field where the border just open for everybody to just walk right in there. And the regime seemed to be playing into the hands where folks are just given ID cards to go and register at the Ghana Elections Commission. Lots and lots of strange things indeed. It takes us to our final question here, Mr. Granger, and it has to do with why has the PVPC administration created special conditions? This is an important question. I'm smiling in the air because we want to hear from you, Mr. Granger. Why is it that the PVPC administration created special conditions for Venezuelan Guyanese? And this is on the minds, Mr. Granger, of so many Guyanese who want to know why special conditions for Venezuelan Guyanese. Why, sir?
Well, to be brief, you know, it's like you have to ask the PPP that, because it is easy to do things correctly. It is easier to ensure that the formal governmental institutional system is allowed to work. And this is where we were at in 2015, that people were coming in, they had health issues, they had identity issues, they had humanitarian concerns, you know, about accommodation and so on. And we worked with international organizations, particularly from the United Nations and the International Organization of Migration, to put things on a transparent, through a transparent process, and to make sure we could account for everyone that came into the country. We introduced computers, we introduced proper documentation, and I would say that there was a transparent system, and anyone could examine that system to determine national identity, to determine eligibility to vote in elections. Look, the Constitution is very liberal. A lot of Guyanese were quite upset at the position that the PPP administration took about Haitians. I mean, Haiti had problems, it still has problems, and people were coming here, and these were intelligent people. People were coming in families. When you see Haitians, you're not looking at bedraggled and destitute refugees. You're looking at families. You're looking husband, wife, children, and the attitude of the government was one of hostility. Now, if a handful of Haitians, and some of them weren't interested in staying, some of them were interested in going to Cayenne or Suriname. Anyway, but even you see 8 or 12 Haitians and the police pounded on them, and they might have to go to the High Court. But here you have thousands and thousands of Venezuelan Guyanese. But instead of having a transparent system, we now have special conditions. This is the first time we are hearing about duty-free cars and tax exemptions and special facilities for birth certificates and marriage certificates. It's obviously a favored group, and this is causing people to say, well, why are these people being treated as favorites? Why aren't they put through the normal process that Guyanese themselves have to go through? And this is raising suspicions. Now, I don't want to put myself in the shoes of the PPP, but the word came out of the mouth of the PPP themselves. We are going to treat these people as citizens, and they're going to vote in the next GRE and LGE. So it seems that the migrant issue is being regarded as a form of vote farm, that some people are going to be treated as voters, not as citizens, as voters. And they're going to be, given every possible assistance to assume that role. And it is a role that has not been extended to other citizens. And I think it's going to cause a lot of problems. We don't know about the social cohesion. Of course, that's another department that the PPP got rid of. So there's no apparent intention to integrate these people in existing societies. Certainly in the Burima Waini, people have complained that even among the Warao are different. The Warao coming from Venezuela behave differently from the Warao and the Caribs living in Guyana. And what we see here is a very dangerous situation. And I don't want to use the word explosive, but even in Brazil, you had Ecuador, you had problems where the government did not, but I'm not accusing the Brazilian government, but because of the large number of migrants, they were not integrated properly, and you had riots in which the migrants themselves were targeted. And I suspect that unless this process is brought under management, serious control, eventually there's going to be a sort of resentment, and Guyanese people who feel that they're being disadvantaged are going to turn on the migrants. Nothing is being done to prevent such an outcome, and it's a dangerous policy for the government to follow. And I would suggest to them that they reestablish the Department of Citizenship so that it could be in charge of an orderly process, that they establish some center for reception and resettlement, so that, all these boatloads of people, they go to the center where they're processed. I remember during the troubles, the PPP administration just gathered about 100 boys from East Coast and processed them. Well, these migrants should be processed, not in a punitive way, but we should know, do they have diseases? Do they have any identification? Are they from Ecuador? Where are they from? Are they from Cuba? But we're not seeing any of that. And I don't know what method the PPP used to determine who is entitled to these special conditions and who is not. But in my view, it is not a sustainable process. It's not a transparent process. And to avoid social confusion and social conflict, I'd advise the government to set up a department, open a resettlement plan, pass legislation to ensure that every migrant coming into this country is handled in a transparent and predictable way.
Well said, Mr. Granger. I'm not sure. These guys seem to be doing their own things in this administration, that they're turning a blind eye on doing what is right. All right. For those of you who joined us a bit late, we dealt with Guyanese migrants and their descendants and where they live, mainly in Puerto Ordaz and San Felix, cities of at the confluence of the Orinoco and the Corini rivers. Their descendants, we dealt with that, although bearing recognizable Guyanese family names, they speak a form of Spanish. And, Mr. Granger, when I, imagine the form of Spanish that they speak, you mean broken Spanish, just like the broken French, a form of Spanish?
I don't know what it is, but I mean, I know, if I can speak about my own country, I remember reading in the paper some time ago, a woman from Quarantine, your home state, was charged for some immigration offense in Canada, and the judge had to send for an interpreter because she was speaking a form of English, which was not recognized in Canada. So I expect that some of these Venezuelan Guyanese will be speaking a form of Spanish, which they may not be recognized in Caracas. And this happens. And I think sometimes people coming from the Caribbean can't understand what Guyanese mean, when they talk about subtit and kotai and all that, that is very Guyanese. And so on. But I don't know what they speak. I don't know if any group from the University of Guyana is making a study. There's no department. As I said, there's just these shadowy committees, which, people might go to a committee meeting with a file and make some notes, but I cannot comment because there's nothing there in the public domain which explains the government migration policy for Venezuelan Guyanese.
Thank you so much, Mr. Granger, and thank you to all our listeners from across Guyana and wherever else you are, in the US, in the UK, in Canada, in the Caribbean, wherever. Some might be watching us in Venezuela as well. Good night to all of you guys, and thank you. See you again, same place next week, right here on 107.1 FM with Anansi Web Education and former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, all 83,000 square miles of Guyana, David Arthur Granger. Thank you, sir.
Have a good night.
You too. Appreciate it. All right, and guys, we will be back next week. See you right here, same place, same time. God bless.
Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day I back down, me now I come home. Inaga, Jackass, I for fetchy load. Oakley Cheyenne, bag over shoulder, running by his side, Alexi and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun not go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokonani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Banga Mary. Listen to this sweet story.